Welcome to a presentation on neoclassical physics. Here we explain all physical phenomena, including quantum and relativistic processes in classical terms, with a little modification. This is the closest thing to the grand unified theory as of now. Neophysics has the most accurate theories of physics. We challenge you to disprove us. If not, we welcome you to join us in the revolution. In this presentation, we discuss the blunder committed by James Clerk Maxwell when he thought he derived the wave equation for light propagation. It is considered to be one of the most beautiful pieces of work in physics. But according to neophysics, it is one of the costliest blunders. It is a conceptual heresy. It has further caused humongous obstacles in our quest to understand the true nature of the universe. This is one of the typical examples of what is wrong with physics as we know it today. Consider a capacitor shown in solid black parallel lines here, connected to an alternating AC source. These are the connecting wires in green. The AC source charges and discharges the capacitor. Charging and discharging creates a varying electric field E1 between the capacitor plates. E1 is shown in black arrows here. This leads to the occurrence of magnetic field B1 around the capacitor, shown in dashed blue lines. We can use Ampere's law modified by Maxwell to know the magnitude and direction of the resulting magnetic field B1. The magnetic field B1 at any point in space is a measure of the changing electric field E1 at that point locally. So this is the modified version of Ampere's law. In this equation, mu naught and epsilon naught are constants. Mu naught is the permeability of free space and epsilon naught is permittivity of free space. Vector J is the current density in the current carrying wires. This equation states that the curl of magnetic field B1 is equal to mu naught into current density J plus displacement current, which is epsilon naught into partial time derivative of electric field E1. In the vicinity where both current density and capacitor influence is present, we need to add both the components in the above equation to find the correct magnetic field. According to actual Ampere's law, if there is an infinitely long but thin current carrying wire with current I, then it produces a magnetic field B around it according to the right hand rule. The B field is shown as these circular red lines here. Suppose now we consider a point at distance d from the wire. Then the magnitude of the magnetic field B at that point is given by B equals mu naught I divided by 2 pi d. The direction of this magnetic field is tangential to the circular paths shown in red. In the vicinity of the capacitor alone, far away from the wires, the current density effect can be ignored. So we can write the equation as with J equals 0. This equation becomes just this. Curl of B1 is mu naught epsilon naught, first partial derivative of E1. In fact, we can argue that in line with the actual Ampere's law, current density is the only contributor, and in capacitors, the current density takes the form J equals epsilon naught first partial time derivative of electric field E1. But we are not going to take that line of approach here, as it is not necessary for this discussion. Suppose now we place a conducting wire loop in the neighborhood of the capacitor, as shown. Then, by applying Maxwell's form of Faraday's law, we can find electric field E2 produced in the wire loop. Basically, we find that the AC source produces the primary electric field E1, which in turn produces the primary magnetic field B1, and which produces the secondary electric field E2 in the loop. This secondary electric field E2 drives a current in the loop, and we can measure that current in the loop by connecting it to an ammeter. We already saw Maxwell's version of Ampere's law. This is Maxwell's version of Faraday's law. This equation describes that the curl of the new or the secondary electric field E2 is equal to negative partial time derivative of the primary magnetic field B1. The negative sign is due to Emil-Lenz. In fact, this law can be called as Faraday-Lenz law. In the actual Faraday-Lenz law, Faraday describes the effect of a moving bar magnet on a conducting wire loop. When the loop is subjected to a changing magnetic field on it, we see a current being generated in the loop. The direction of current is such that the secondary magnetic field B2 generated by the loop opposes the direction of the original magnetic field producing it. That is, if the magnet is moving towards the loop tends to repel it. And if the magnet is moving away, the loop tends to attract it. The secondary magnetic field, or B field, generated by the coil will be a function of the current generated in the coil as per ampere. The current generated will depend on the resistance in the coil. Here the secondary B field is generated by charges moving within the coil. Here we see the expression of Faraday's law, original expression of Faraday's law, which states that the voltage or the electromotive force EMF in the coil is equal to minus A del B by del T, where A is the area of the coil. Here it is a circle, so it's the area of the circle, and del B by del T, where B is the magnetic field due to this bar magnet. EMF is a function of the shape and state of motion of the coil, not just the magnetic field. This is not a proper local description, as B is defined over the entire coil, not just the charges moving inside the coil. So comparing Maxwell's and Faraday's law, we see that there is a B1 term here and there is a del B by del T term here. So let us now take partial derivative of Ampere's equation defining the magnetic field B1. So we get the partial time derivative of this as del by del T of curl of B1 is equal to curl of just del B by del T. And on the right hand side we get this the second derivative of E1, mu naught epsilon naught del square by del T square E1. In this equation, we are assuming that the first partial time derivative of E1 is non-zero, that is del E1 by del T is non-zero. So in the Ampere's law time derivative, there is a del B by del T term which is del cross this, or nabla cross del B by del T term. So in order to match this, let us now take the curl of Faraday's equation to match with the time derivative of the Ampere's equation. So taking the curl, we get this expression here, and which is nothing but del cross this expression, and on the right hand side we get this. This equation relates the secondary electric field E2 to the primary electric field E1. So we got this equation by equating the curl of Faraday's equation with the time derivative of Ampere's equation. Using vector identity, further we can replace this left hand side expression with this, where this is the Laplacian operator, this is nabla square or del square E2, and this is the gradient of the divergence of E2, and this is equal to mu naught epsilon naught del square E1 by del T square. At this point, Maxwell makes the assumption that there is no wire loop in the vicinity of the capacitor. Since there is no conductor, there will be no chance of any charge buildup. Therefore, in accordance with Gauss's law, we get divergence of E2 equals 0, or nabla dot E2 equals 0. But the loop as a whole is neutral. So we can use nabla.e2 equals 0 even when the loop is present. So using this divergence is 0 in this equation, we can eliminate this term. So we are just left with this del square E2 equals this. We can see that this electromagnetic equation is pretty close to D'Alembert's wave equation, where psi is an oscillating variable. There are several issues even with this formulation of the wave equation, but we shall not discuss that in this presentation. In order to make the electromagnetic equation same as the D'Alembert wave equation, Maxwell makes one physically impossible assumption at this point. Maxwell switches off the AC source and removes the capacitor from the scene, and further assumes that the now disembodied electric field E1 of the capacitor is same as the secondary electric field E2 produced by the magnetic field B1, which was in turn produced by the primary electric field E1. That is, initially, the AC source was producing the primary electric field E1, which in turn produced the primary magnetic field B1, and which produced the secondary electric field E2. But according to the new assumption, the primary electric field is same as the secondary electric field. That is, E1 is equal to E2. This is actually unviable because the original E1 does not match with E2 either in magnitude or in direction. In fact, E2 cannot produce any magnetic field even when it is varying. However, Maxwell used the idea regardless of its viability since he needed the wave equation. With that assumption, E1 equals E2, the situation becomes cyclical now. That is, according to the new assumption, E1 equals E2, therefore, the electric field E2 produces the magnetic field B1, which in turn produces the electric field E2. So these two fields, E2 and B1, they form a self-sustaining pair. They don't depend on any other thing. They just create and maintain each other. Therefore, replacing E1 with E2 on the right-hand side of the original equation, we get D'Alembert equation. And hence the speed of propagation c can be defined as c square equals 1 by mu naught epsilon naught. That is, by equating these two, we see that this term 1 by c square will be equal to mu naught epsilon naught. This has been traditionally thought of as proof of the constancy of speed of light, and that light is like an elastic wave moving through luminiferous ether, like sound waves move through air. The ether medium should be highly incompressible, yet very low density. Thus, possibly it should itself be made of extremely fast-moving small particles. In fact, absence of ether spells disaster to the electromagnetic wave equation. Maxwell himself was a strong proponent of ether theories. So these are the two equations we get by Maxwell's method. This is for the electric field, this is for the magnetic field. These two are the same equations, just E2 has been replaced by B2 in this. So apart from the ether, there are certain fallacies leading up to this electromagnetic wave equation. Chief among them is the assumption that the secondary electric field E2 produced by the primary electric field E1, which was produced by the capacitor charging and discharging, can itself create secondary magnetic field B2. That is, E2 can itself create B2, some new field, even without the presence of the conducting loop. In that case, E2 should modify the original electric field by producing a new net electric field E1 plus E2, which should modify the calculation of magnetic field as nabla cross B1 plus nabla cross B2 equals mu naught epsilon naught del by del T of this E1 plus E2. This new magnetic field B1 plus B2 then produces a tertiary electric field E3, which then modifies the electric field as E1 plus E2 plus E3, which then produces a new magnetic field, and so on. So according to Maxwell, these calculations of the fields can never stabilize. Besides, E2 is not a new field. It is only a measure of the temporal changes of the original field E1. Suppose there is a charge Q moving along a straight line as shown. Suppose in the region of space where Q is moving, there is a small test charge small q tied to a particular fixed position O through a string. If Q was at rest at position A, it would produce an electric field in the direction AA prime. If Q was at rest at B, it would produce an electric field in the direction BB prime, and so on. So corresponding to the Q's position, the test charge small q attains an equilibrium position directed along the line joining Q to O. If Q is moving towards right, then the test charge Q ought to be moving left in order to align with the electric field line. The alignment won't happen instantaneously. There would be a delay for the information to reach from the new position of Q to the old position of small q. At point O, we can measure the electric field is continuously changing. We can also abstract this changing electric field as a new quantity, the magnetic field B. Note, magnetic field is not a different quantity. It is just an abstraction of the changing local electric field at that point in space. But in Maxwell's equations, they are treated as different quantities which are causally linked to each other. So here, vector A prime B prime and B prime C prime do not indicate creation of new secondary electric fields. They are just a measure of the change in the local electric field around point O. So in Maxwell's scheme, they are treated as creation of new secondary, tertiary, and so on fields. So basically what happens is the AC source gives rise to the primary electric field E1, which gives rise to the primary magnetic field B1, which gives rise to the secondary electric field E2, which gives rise to the secondary magnetic field B2, and so on up to infinity. And to find the final effective electric field, we have to sum up all these infinite electric fields produced in different steps. And also same as the magnetic field. So these additions go on up to infinity. Hence they never stop. So this whole exercise of removing the primary source responsible for the electric field and magnetic field production, but letting only the fields somehow persist in space, is akin to the grin of the Cheshire cat, where only the grin exists but the cat disappears. Perhaps Lewis Carroll got inspired by Maxwell's electromagnetic wave equation. The idea is same as the concept behind M.C. Escher's impossible drawing shown here, and same as the idea behind Ouroboros, where the snake eats itself and regenerates itself, independent of anything else. Similarly, in the electromagnetic wave equation, the electric and magnetic fields create themselves out of nowhere and sustain themselves. Therefore, Maxwell's analysis neither proves the wave nature of light nor does it prove the constancy of speed of light. It is just a blunder, a physically unviable situation. It is essentially a mystical concept. As we saw earlier, magnetic field is just a measure of the changing electric field at that local point. So this means a changing electric field can create itself and sustain itself according to Faraday. This is same as like how we describe our Lord Shiva, that he is Swayambhu, self-created, out of nothing. So electromagnetic waves are also like Swayambhu, self-created, out of nothing, which is impossible. So this whole Maxwell's idea is wrong. So we stop there. Thank you. If you want to understand the concepts of physics in the clearest way, regardless of the concerns about scoring high marks in exams, please visit neophysics.com. Thank you again.